You know, chipping doesn't have to be that hard. In these next 3 videos, I'm going to share with you some of the real secrets to making chipping easy. People have told me time and time again this has helped them tremendously on their short game, and I can't wait to share it with you. Let's go and get started. Ugh, that makes you so frustrated. You just want to snap all your clubs in two. Do you feel like when you get over that important chip shot, maybe late in the round, to win a hole, win a match, or just to play a really good round, put up a good score, you start to chunk them, you start to thin them. The hands get really tight, everything gets jittery and shaky and quick. When you really want to be smooth and confident over the ball, it just doesn't seem like that's possible. Well, there's actually some really common instruction, and if you follow this, it works really good, but only for a certain type of chip. I'm going to talk about what type of chip that is, when you can use that type of shot, and how if you try to apply that same technique to all your chips and pitches, it can really destroy your confidence in your game. You get really handsy and you get really jittery over it when those shots matter the most. By the end of this video, if you follow these steps, you're going to feel really confident over the ball. You're going to know that you can step up to any chip shot and knock it close. Let's go and get started. All right, so what's this shot that only works sometimes and can really hurt your other shots? And that is what I call the putt chip. And that's where the idea is that we're going to use our putting stroke to hit this chip shot. There's a variety of ways that we have to do this, but this actually works really well if we do this really close to the green. So if I'm only, 20 or 30 feet from this hole, it can be really easy just to putt the ball up there and be pretty consistent with it. So how does this work exactly? Well, number one, you want to take your putting stance. You want to make this feel like a putting stroke. So as I set up this golf ball, I'm going to take the width of my stance I would normally if I'm putting. The second piece here is that instead of having my normal grip and having the shaft kind of on an angle here, I'm going to raise this club up a little bit. So now the toe is down, the heel is a little bit up on the ground. And what this does is this takes this leading edge of this, or the flat part, the sole of the club, and it tilts it up this way. Now that's much less likely to grab in some of the grass. If only my toe is touching, it's going to kind of brush through the grass. It's going to have much less chance of getting stuck and digging, that kind of thing. So with those hands up, that helps it to glide through the turf a little bit easier. The third thing here, I want to use a fairly low lofted club. So I'm not using a sand wedge, a pitching wedge, anything like that. I'm really using like a 7-iron, 8-iron, 9-iron, somewhere around in there to get these little putt chips. And then finally, I'm really locking my legs. When you putt, one thing that all great putters have in common is they don't really move their lower body. So as I'm making this little chip putt, I'm not moving my knees at all. They stay perfectly still. You're locking in your hands and arms. You're kind of getting a little forward shaft lean, and you can kind of imagine all this being locked in. And all I'm doing as I go back and forth is that stays locked in. I rock it back and forth, and that's going to be just like a putting stroke, only we're chipping off the green. Now that can be really handy. These are actually pretty easy shots. It's not that tough when you're only 20 or 30 feet away, but there is some problems with this. So as you start to get a little farther from the green, you're not going to be able to hit them as close doing this. And here's the reason why. When I putt, if you think about even a pretty long putt, maybe I take my putter back to here. That would be a pretty long putt as I'm coming back and through. That's about all I feel comfortable with, keeping my knees still, keeping my body still, and still hitting this putt. Well, if I get rid of this 7-iron, and maybe I need to hit it over something, or I need the ball to check up a little bit faster, all of a sudden I switch to my sand wedge or lob wedge, and I do this same technique, the ball just isn't going to go very far. All right, so that bump and run shot, or that locked in putting stroke idea, works really good when I have to make a short stroke. So if I'm only taking it back a couple feet and taking it through a couple feet like I would be with a putter, I can stay really still with my lower body. I can stay locked in with my upper body. I can take a 7-iron, an 8-iron, a hybrid, just get the ball bumping up there, and it's really easy. But at some point, we get far enough away from the green, or we have trouble in the way. Imagine there's a bunker here in our way that we had to hit it over that bunker, to where that little short bump and run, locked in putting stroke style just isn't going to work. And if we try to have that same idea and have that locked in approach, that putting type approach, and we try to make that work when we're farther away, everything falls apart. So now if I'm farther away here and I have my sand wedge, let's imagine that there is a bunker or there is rough or something where I have to carry the ball on the green here, and now all of a sudden I'm trying to still keep my lower body still, I'm trying to lock everything up here at the top still. I just can't make that happen if I really use the technique the right way. The ball won't go far enough. So what you end up doing is you end up getting pretty jerky with the hands and wrists because you're trying to get more energy into it, and now all of a sudden we end up with this kind of mismatched, jerky, jabby type stroke that can easily shoot it over the green or be well short of the green. All right, so now let's jump in on what the pros are doing to free things up. Now here, the main difference. One style, the putting style, everything's locked in, we're trying to control. This style, we're loosening everything up. So if you pay attention to my knees, and what you'll see with all great chippers, they're gonna let these knees pivot. So I'm not trying to lock those in, I'm letting those flow as though I was gonna just toss a golf ball up on the green. So if I do this, watch my knees here first and then we'll get into the details. So here I'm gonna let everything turn on through, let my body create momentum, and now I can easily just chip a ball up there. It's not very tough at all. I'm letting my body create the momentum. So with this one, and one of the reasons that this is so much better with your hands and arms, and you don't feel like you're jabby, is I'm letting my body rotate. My hips are rotating, my chest is rotating, and that's creating the momentum. If I just hold this club very softly in my hands, now all of a sudden it's creating momentum that's gonna hit the ball. If I try to lock that in, I have to create that speed with my hands and arms, and things get a little crazy. So that's the first key there. In order to do that, I'm gonna set up with my heels almost touching. You'll see a lot of great chippers doing this. And I'm also gonna open my feet a little bit toward the target. That makes things easier for me to open up and pivot on through this shot. That's gonna allow me to use my body to create that momentum. I'm also, instead of locking my wrist in and keeping that really tight and rigid with my hands higher, I'm gonna go ahead and just let my hands hang freely and let my wrist stay really soft as I'm doing this. So as I'm going back and through, you can see my knees pivot and everything else just kind of goes along for the ride. I get a little bit of wrist action, I get a little bit of wrist hinge, just completely fine. I'm not trying to lock it in and guide it. I'm letting the momentum of my body create that speed, create that momentum. So you can see there, it's really easy to hit these clean when you let your body do the work. So those are the main keys there. When we're hitting the putt type shot, that's completely fine if you're really close to the green and you can make this stroke that just goes back to here and back to here. At some point, that's not gonna be a big enough stroke. Or at some point, we're not gonna be able to roll the ball across the ground because there's a bunker in the way or there's rough in the way, and we're gonna have to make a bigger stroke. At that point, when you make that bigger stroke, instead of trying to lock things in, free things up. Ankles close together, feet open toward the target, my body creates the momentum, and my wrists stay nice and loose. Now there's only a couple things you need to do to be a phenomenal chipper, to really just to make this easy. Number one, you need to keep your body and your arms working together. If I do that correctly, you can see that this green band stays under my arm. Now if my arms get separated from my body, you can see that flies out. I'm gonna show you this drill here in a second. Now number two, we have to make sure that we don't get stuck underneath. If my club starts to tip underneath, the right side of my body starts to fall down, I'm gonna get those chunks, or I'm gonna get those drop kicks that just kind of fly across the green. So once I show you this method, it's gonna be really easy. You're gonna feel super confident, and you're gonna feel like any chip or pitch that you have, you're really just gonna be able to knock it close and make clean, solid contact. All right, so that almost never happens. I promise that was on the first take. Usually it doesn't work out that good, but let me show you a couple things here with this rubber band. So this is a great drill. Chris Hunsucker, one of our Top Speed Golf certified instructors, showed me this. I didn't have one of these bands and I put it off for almost a year. I never tried this drill out because I never ordered one of these. And don't do what I did. If you don't already have one of these little TheraBands, use any kind of band that you have, or if you don't have one, just order one, because this is the best chipping drill. It is phenomenal at how good it helps you to not only stay connected, but also to keep that club from dropping underneath. Now, the real goal with this is to make sure that you make clean contact with the ground. That's what chipping really is. Anything else we do is just to come down, make contact with the ground at the right spot, and be very consistent with that. So what I've done is I've wrapped this around the club face. I'm gonna stick the other end under my armpit. So what I'll do is I'll grab the club with my left hand, I'll stick it with my right hand under my armpit. I get that question all the time from people I've showed this drill to. And what I'm working on here is I'm making sure my body keeps on rotating and turns into my left arm. So you can imagine here, the upper part of my left arm, this bone here, the bicep of my arm, my humerus bone here is really attached across my body. It's cinched in against my left pec, and that cinched in feeling there is going to pinch this rubber band. Now, if I rotate my body and I keep my knees moving. So notice how my legs and my knees are gonna move through this shot. I can turn into this left arm and I'm very connected. You hear all great chippers and pitchers talk about how connected they are. This is what they mean. This is the part that's connected. And that allows them to keep that face very, very square and very consistent so that you can hit the ground in the same spot over and over again. You don't have to worry about chunking and thinning if you're doing this. So grab this rubber band, stick it underneath your arm. If you don't have a rubber band, you can use a glove, but I don't like that nearly as much because it doesn't give you that feedback of the connection. You can hit some easy chips, and I'll just go ahead and knock one 10 feet here or so, just showing you how you can actually hit them with a rubber band. It's not the best because it's gonna kind of mess up the contact there, but you get the idea. The main thing is that I wanna keep a decent amount of tension here. That way, if my body stops, if my legs stop moving, if my hips stop moving, and I just arm it, it flies out. That's what I see daggone near every player. I would say pretty much 100% of players that are struggling to get that consistent contact are doing that motion. Let me give you a couple keys that make you want to do this motion. So sometimes players will put the ball too far back in their stance, they'll have too much forward shaft lean, and that'll get them into this kind of very descending blow. Now when that happens, the body stops, it stands up. A lot of times you'll lose your posture, and then you're gonna throw the hands and arms to keep from burying this club in the ground. Now if you did that, you'll see how you get this chicken wing action, and that chicken wing is actually good for that movement. Because if I didn't do the chicken wing, I would go ahead and stay connected here. I would chop down into it and I just cold chunk it. Now when you use that rubber band, you're automatically gonna feel where you need to play the ball position, how you need to come into contact to keep that rubber band and brush the turf and come to that finish. So there's really no way to cheat it. You put that rubber band under your arm, it gets your ball position better, it gets your angle of attack better, it keeps your connection, it keeps you brushing the ground in the same spot. I mean, it's really just a daggone good drill. If you're curious, I'm gonna go ahead and show you a couple other pieces with that I'd recommend, just to save you a little bit of time. I like to think of my ball position in relationship to my left foot. So if my stance is very narrow like this, I'm gonna open my stance slightly. I like to have my toes slightly ahead. That helps you to pivot in front and again, keep that connection here. And I wanna play the ball position kind of off my left heel. Now if I had a little wider stance, again, that ball position would still be somewhere kind of toward my left heel. If I have a narrow stance, it's toward my left heel. Some people will do it in relationship to their right foot, and I don't think that's right. Because if your stance is narrow, yes, this ball position is on my right foot. But if I get my stance a little wider, and I play it on my right foot, now I'm chopping down into it. And that's because our weight is left. Since our weight is left, our weight is over our left foot, we should play our ball position in relationship to our left foot. So that's piece number one. Stick that rubber band, stick whatever kind of band you have under your armpit, make some swings. I could go into a ton of detail about every little tiny thing that's happening there, but I'll be honest with you. You wrap that rubber band around, you practice for a couple days like that for just 15, 20 shots, you're gonna get the feeling right away of what the best chippers in the world are feeling and how they're moving the body, how they're staying connected. So I'm gonna wrap this rubber band around the club head again, and now we're gonna talk about getting stuck under. This is another really big one that a lot of players struggle with. This is the second piece to this chipping method that's gonna make it really easy to hit it solid. So when I get stuck under, what's happening there is when I take my backswing, my club goes a little too much to the inside. In my downswing, my right side of my body drops. And you can see how this gets the club closer to the ground, and it gets it wanting to ground out back here. Now that's an exaggeration, but if I do too much of that, club to the inside, ground out, boom, that's a chunk. Now if I'm lucky enough to miss the ground and not chunk it, now the club's working back up into the ball and you thin it across the green. So really the chunk shot and the thin shot are the same thing. Everything's falling right, falling underneath. This rubber band is also awesome for that, because what it does is when I make my backswing, because there's a little bit of tension here, I'm typically gonna keep this club head outside of my hands and arms. So as I make this backswing when I'm looking from down the line, you're gonna see how this club head is not in here, it's staying a little bit out. And then from there, all I need to do is keep my body left and rotate through to the finish. Now when I get to the finish, I want to make sure my chest is over my hips and everything is rotated on through. What I don't want to do is go here, fall this way, and not finish, so fall to the right. A great little tip for that is when you set up, go ahead and set up with your spine a little bit farther forward, or almost the opposite of what you would do in your full swing. Now we know from the Top Speed Golf system that we have to have a little spine tilt away in the full swing. In the short game, it's actually the opposite of that. I want to have my spine basically straight up and down so that I can keep that low point very consistent. Now the most common question I get there is, why do I have to have it different for the full swing and the short game? Well, in the short game, it's all about consistency and hitting one point. You don't have to create any power. We would do it the same way in the full swing if we never had to hit it over 150 yards. This is the most consistent way of doing it. But unfortunately, golf requires some power. You have to get behind the golf ball to really create a lot of power. When we're close to the green, we don't need power. We just need to be consistent. So I'm gonna set up with my upper body a little bit more to the left. I'm gonna visualize this rubber band staying connected, club head's outside, and then I'm just gonna rotate on through. Now if I do that, things just get super, super easy here. Let's go ahead and try another one out. There we go, 2 in a row, both within 1.5 feet of the hole. Not gonna do much better than that. All right guys, got a really fun video for you. This is really cool. We're gonna talk about a kind of a controversial drill we'll do here in a little bit. But this is really gonna help you to stop duffing and chunking those chip shots. I know how absolutely frustrating that can be. And the stay down is what really causes this for most players. And let me kind of go through step by step exactly what's doing this for you. We've been taught to put the ball a little bit back in our stance. If we're going to this flag up here, you know, I'm gonna have a fairly narrow stance, almost the foot on the instep of your right foot is kind of traditional thinking there. We're gonna have a lot of forward shaft lean, and then naturally, we've been told to not really move our knees or our hips at all. Keep all this locked in, very, very stable, don't let it rotate at all. And then our chest, when we do that, our chest is gonna stay down. So as we come through here, you'll often notice that left arm tends to fold up and almost chicken wing a little bit. And the reason for that is my chest is kind of staying down. The only way to keep the club moving, if my chest isn't rotating, is to use all hands and arms, and that left arm kind of folds up like that. So if I do one of these for you, the first one, I'm gonna go ahead and let my arms swing the way they naturally wanna swing when I do this. Ball back, forward shaft lean, very little body rotation, and I chunk it. If I happen to hit it perfect, it could shoot out really fast like that one. My distance control is gonna be very tough. That one, look how steep I came into that. I just happened to time that one up perfectly. If I'm a little bit behind it, it's gonna be more like this. And I'm not even gonna hit it anywhere. The club's just gonna bounce right over top of the golf ball. And that is the most frustrating shot in golf. And again, that comes from a couple of bad ideas in my opinion. Number one is keeping the body solid and stable and not having it move around. When I do that, my chest tends to not open up and rotate very much, and now I'm all hands and arms. And when it gets under pressure, when you need it the most, that's when it's going to be the toughest. We've talked enough about the bad way, let's go ahead and talk about the correct way now. So here, I'm going to go ahead and put that ball a little farther up in my stance. I don't want it to be way back. So if I'm looking at just my left foot, it's almost going to be on the instep of my left foot here at address. Now my right foot's gonna be pretty close there. I'm gonna open up this left foot a little bit too, just to help me kind of pivot and rotate on through. The second piece is, just like I said, I'm gonna pivot and rotate. I'm not gonna have my chest down, body locked solid. I'm gonna go ahead and let this rotate on around. If you were to take a golf ball and simply just toss it, if I asked you to grab this golf ball and toss it to that flag, every single person I've ever asked to do this, they naturally let their hips, their shoulders, their arm, everything open up to the target, and you just toss it right on up there. It's really easy to be accurate when you're doing that. We're doing the same thing. That's essentially what a golf swing is. So we got the ball a little bit more up in my stance. Everything is gonna go ahead and rotate on around so I can keep everything moving. If everything keeps on moving, I can let the body pivot swing the golf club. I don't have to feel like I'm doing all hands and arms. It's just the pivot of my body, almost like that tossing motion that we just did with the golf ball there. Now, the last piece there is I wanna finish with my belt buckle and my chest nice and high. If I do the stay down, if you look at my shirt buttons here when I finish, I'm not gonna move my body and I'm here. Look at my shirt buttons, they're still pointing down to the ground. If I do it correctly and I let myself pivot and that finished nice and high. Look at my shirt buttons now. They've rotated all the way around. My chest is nice and high. And again, what that does, that keeps you from digging into the ground. As my body turns up, so essentially I'm doing this motion. If you're looking from down the line, that'll be me standing up out of that. I'm doing that as I'm rotating, so that club can't dig from there. That upward motion kind of counteracts the downward motion or the downward swing of the club. So let me go ahead and hit a couple shots here for you. I have an extremely tough shot here, very bare ground, and I just have to land this just perfectly right on the front of the green to get that to turn out nicely, but it's not really that hard when you get this rotation motion. Now let's do what I call the superintendent's nightmare drill. Let me go ahead and grab a couple more balls. We'll walk up here to the green. And with this one, it's really gonna force you to use the pivot of your body to get that club swinging. If I use my hands and arms again to try to guide that club, we're gonna have a lot of trouble. So let's just grab a few balls here. I recommend if you're gonna do this, do it on the front of your chipping green or the practice area. If you do happen to hit a couple bad ones when you first start, nobody's gonna be too mad at you. But I'm gonna do the same thing here, and I'm just gonna let that club kind of swing a little bit off the ground. And I'm gradually gonna go ahead and make that more like a real golf pitching motion, and I'm barely gonna start to touch the ground here. Notice again, that ball's not too far back. My knees, my hips, my shoulders, everything pivots on through. And as I come through, my chest is nice and high. If I stay down, I'm gonna get handsy. I'm gonna take a big chunk out of this green. Once you get comfortable with that, now you can just go ahead, hit some nice easy shots. That one flew about 20 feet in the air, and you'll see there's no mark on this ground. Now some people think when I do this that I'm talking about timing up, picking that ball perfectly off the ground. I'm not talking about doing that. I can never get that precise. I'm talking about letting the pivot of the body control the depth that this club is swinging. So as long as my chest comes through here high and it doesn't stay down, now I can sweep and barely brush that turf. If you think that it's so difficult that I could never do that, well, let's try it out with one hand. As long as my pivot is good, now I've picked it up with just the left hand. If you don't think that the left hand would be hard enough, let's go ahead and try the right hand. Same thing, I can do this all day long because my body pivot is what's actually allowing this club to ground out. I can even hit 40 and 50 yard shots without ever taking a mark here. So you can see there's nothing happening to this green. I'm not some super athlete or anything like that. I'm actually just an average athlete, not even that great. But it's when you use that pivot, it just makes things really easy. So work on those drills, guys. I think that's really gonna help you to be a lot more consistent. Ball a little bit up in your stance. I gotta let my knees, my hips, everything rotate on through. And then finally, as I finish, let my belt buckle and my chest be angled back. That's that upward motion. So if I look at the club head here, that's that upward motion that keeps me from digging into the turf. You're gonna be able to pick all of them clean. So the next thing we need to do is now we need to learn how to get a lot of spin on the ball. I got a great preview of one of my spin shot videos, and all you need to do is click the card on your screen or down below, click the link in the description, and you'll get instant access to that video. I'm gonna talk about how we can pair up these nice clean divots now. Now let's learn how to really get that spin on there so we can get that one hop and stop, or as we get farther out from the green, actually get that ball to spin back. Let's go ahead and get started. Pitch shot could be anywhere from right by the green all the way back to probably 50 or 60 yards or so. And that's what you're gonna wanna do when you wanna get a little bit more spin and get the ball a little bit more up in the air. We're gonna go ahead and let the wrist set a little bit more, have a little bit more club action, get the ball to go a little higher in the air with a little bit more spin. So let me go ahead and describe what is a good pitch shot so that you know what you're really going for. I think we gotta start from there, start from contact. So as I make contact, I want to be coming in very shallow to the ground. So I don't want to be taking much of a divot. I don't want to be hitting down into the ground. As the club releases and we have a flat spot where the club travels very level with the ground for 5 or 6 inches on these pitch shots. So when that happens, let me go ahead and exaggerate. As my hand is coming down, my hands are close to the ground. As this club gets closer and closer to the ground, my hands move up. As the club moves down, now you're seeing them having this flat spot.